blockchain really is just a distributed, cryptographically secure, and that's an important aspect of this cryptography. It's a transparent ledger, and it also establishes ownership, but it also allows for the efficient exchange of ownership, and that is what makes it just being a database. So if we look at blockchain and what it's currently contributing to the digital economy, a lot of people say it's a revolutionary technology, but the World Economic Forum said that they believe that it's actually a foundational. So it will create the foundations for a new economic and social system, which will create new value, investment, and exchange. So if we look at what we already have, and this is a really young technology, so Bitcoin years. It's not been hacked, by the way, so it's actual network that whose economic model is preventing it from being hacked. So that's just something to remember. But what we have now is to have a frictionless instant transaction and value exchange via Bitcoin, which is one of the coins that are available. We also now have the opportunity to see distributed autonomous governance models. In other words, where we actually create logical algorithms, ways for people to actually govern themselves in a peer-to-peer network way. The other aspect is also around distributed ledgers, so we have an immutable, secure, time-stamped record keeping. So if you're responsible, it will then maintain that history as assets move, as property records move. And it cannot be changed afterwards, and someone can't claim, oh my goodness, this was never transferred to you, because it's actually agreed by all the nodes that actually transaction to say no, that transaction actually took place. And then the part that's really getting everyone very excited is around smart contracts. So this is an automated way for us to actually have contracts, and when a contract is fulfilled, say for example, you need to come and paint my house, there are conditions. I will pay you 50%. Okay. Then the money will automatically transfer into your account. And that's sort of a simple explanation of smart contracts. Is fueling this digital economy, and this is some of the early impacts. And just in terms of fintech, and I'm using fintech because I think one of the things that we're all really looking at is how are we going to do more wealth creation? How are we going to grow our economy? So we could reach 2.5 billion financially, and we certainly have quite a few projects around that. Often folks talk around unbanking with the bank, so this is banking through the moment, and they're very aware of it. A lot of interesting projects taking place around that. Forex and remittances is an area that has a lot of projects as well. And then obviously trade and settlements, microfinance, and the one thing that you've probably heard about are these token generating events where it's actually starting to overtake funding. And the success record of successful startups in this space is the same as those that were funded with venture capitalists. And then we have new digital asset classes, which is really fascinating topic all on its own. So what is of interest to you is the fact that we can tokenize assets. We have digital identity management, which we can link to assets. The Internet of Things is going to be very much around these type of value exchanges on these systems. Into machine learning, already if we look at the Bitcoin blockchain, we can see that's machine learning in action. Predictive analytics is already happening on blockchain, and then of course supply chain management. So make blockchain simple. If we look and there are 4 aspects that you can look at it when you start looking at it or investigating it for your initiatives. The first aspect is around identity and security, so cyber security, multi-citizen services, and I'm going to give you an example of this. Asset-based, lots of things happening around diamonds, how we track diamonds as they come across the supply chain, and logistics is really being redone at the moment using these technologies, and to encourage you to look for really interesting projects that are happening in this space, organizations like Siemens and IBM and so on. Value exchange is the aspect where we look at document storage and delivery. So your Dropbox, for example, is now a decentralized Dropbox. So everyone has a computer can actually hold files, all files. Content management is a hot topic at the moment. A lot of people are actually looking at ways consumers can be, or creators content creators can actually be rewarded for their work. And then there's the whole fintech piece, which I just described. At the moment is this whole convergence of different platforms. So there's an interoperability that's happening between blockchain, the internet of value exchange, or as most people talk about, the internet of things, and then of course digital commerce. Fascinating. For example, I am advising a startup at the moment. They have an actual bot that they've created to teach people around how to trade Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in a safe way. So that's an example, and it's a wallet, so you can actually use this as a wallet for yourself. So this is a simple example of how this is taking place. This is just to give you an idea of the actual landscape growth in this area. So we have wealth management, we have digital banking, already mobile phone platforms, which is the original ones. We started projects of peer-to-peer lending happening, and then obviously crowdfunding, we saw that explode with the ICO as well. At the moment, what we see are four very distinct asset investment classes. So there's the cryptocurrencies aspect, which Lumens is another one that you might have heard of. That's a lot of NGOs are starting to use. And crypto commodities is an interesting aspect. So that is the actual digital resources. So for example, your computing power, your storage capacities, and your networks and bandwidth. And then we have tokenized assets. So those are, for example, games and music. And then a lot of you might have heard of something called CryptoKitties, but this is crypto art and collectibles. So that's non-fungible tokens. You cannot change the token at all, and that's designed to be unique and tradable. So we just mark you any of the projects in this way to see where is it that you're actually creating investment, or if folks come to you and necessarily would like to work with you to create new solutions. And one of the things I always say to people is, make sure that there's a real result. One of the things, lessons learned is a lot of organizations sort of looked at it as, here's the blockchain and let's see what we can solve with it, but it really needs to be the other way around. So what you can do is look at value creation opportunities, so content creation, contract share certificates, crowdfunding, and so on. Look at value management. So how do we decentralize registration, storage, and distribution of value? For example, in cities, things around property records. The whole way that we can have decentralized access to and control of these assets. So our citizens in the city, the merchants, people who have to have licenses, and then the validation and compliance of all of that. So just to show. So I'm showing a little bit of history here in Canada, but I'm sure that you see a lot of this happening globally. But this is just in 2013, we had the first Bitcoin ATM, and that was considered a really interesting. Remember that ATM does not need a bank, so that goes straight onto the blockchain network. If we fast forward around money, where are we today? Circle is really very interesting things. You can have a look at that, and you can see the languages around what the world looks like today in terms of money. So it's crypto power. It's money that unites us instead of dividing us. It's open platforms, mindsets, and possibility, connecting everyone, and fundamentally shapes the world for better. And I think you can see it's not just about the technology, but it's, as I said, there's a big cultural change taking place. And in fact, one of the things that I say to people is I believe we're in the new axial age. The previous axial age, we saw a lot of, at the time when we saw globally, you can see Plato, Aristotle, Confucius, all around the world. And so there's a belief that we are not entering the new axial age and we can have new ways of thinking. So if we go back to cities, this is just an example from Canada. It was done with IBM, DIAC, which is around digital identity. And the government here in British Columbia looked at smart property registries. This was after the Digital Futures Complete sponsored research and report on how to establish BC as a global hub for fintech and blockchain technologies. And so the next step for them was to actually look at this in a really pragmatic way and see if they can apply this. The area that we're seeing a lot of work, and I think the plan even started this after that I've had so one city in Japan is actually working on this. So I recommend you look at that. I can't recall the name now, but it's the idea of distributing. If you think about again, if your system in the city, you know, if you've got a grid going down because of a hurricane or because of rain or anything else that's to do with the weather and so on, then you actually, if the grid is distributed, down the other parts of the grid can pick it up. So that's the one area that is really promising. But there's another aspect of this as well, and that is to start actually getting people who use electricity involved, and in fact, to start developing systems where they can actually generate energy using solar energy. So they invest in their own solar panels, and then they're actually going to put it back on the grid for others to use all the excess energy that they don't have at that moment. And because of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, you can actually now create a network for energy inside cities and even beyond. And so Siemens is working on a project that you can look up in Brooklyn, and then I also sort of showing you just a token project, solar energy. So a space to really look out for in cities, and a great opportunity, I think, to do something really practical and get citizens involved in creating a future in the cities. And then there's the area that I thought you might also find interesting, which is smart control. So as people talk about autonomous vehicles and relieving congestion, I invite you to look at four to three interfaces where they're going to use cryptocurrencies to facilitate communication between vehicles. So say, for example, trucks on the road, and you're finding that they're actually slowing down traffic. Then there could be an exchange between trucks and smaller vehicles to move to another lane, and they actually will get rewarded for that. And so it's using this gamification, the token system, to change the way we behave when we're in traffic. So that was a very short introduction, but I hope that this helps you just to get some ideas and provoke some conversations around how this might help you.
Well, thank you very much, Marie. Hey, can you guys? Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me on that end? Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So yes, thanks again, Marie, and I'm going to ask the audience to hold their questions. I'm sure that there's probably plenty of questions, but I hope this is making sense to folks here. Let me. I'm going to have Michael up here next, and Michael, your presentation, and while you're doing that, I will ask him, is this making sense to you folks? I mean, in terms of, you know, we're trying to keep it not terribly technical and provide some yeah. Well, yeah, it's the wonder of having your computer and everything ring when somebody calls you now, right? That's the benefit. But I mean, hopefully, and what we're trying to do is, rather than dive into the deep technical, you know, show off a lot of use cases, or the technical details of those use cases, really what we're trying to do is frame what you need to be thinking about, and how you're thinking about applying the technology in your city, because there is a lot of rush to embrace it, and there's a lot of cool stuff that it can do. But until you've really thought about what it means to decentralize a process for your organization, it's because when we're trying to apply our understanding of the world on top of this technology, it doesn't really match up very well. So with that, I'm going to introduce Michael here, who's going to take us away and talk about window of viability. And his process and theory of window of viability embraces the ideas of this transition from hierarchy to holarchy that Marie had pointed out through the example of starfish. You know, right? If you cut the head off the spider, it's not going to be able to operate, or even a leg or something like that. With starfish, it's more of a cooperative organism, and that's really what we're trying to do is show the relationship in this technology and the fact that cities are organisms, and how this technology really takes us into that realm of being able to build more autonomous city organisms. So With that, Michael, why don't you go ahead and tell us about OpenCSR?
Can you hear me okay, folks?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to present the two frameworks, well, an overall arching framework called Window by adoption to market ecosystem design, which can be used in smart city design. So it's a particular framework that I'm developing myself. It's my own independent research. And OpenCSR, which is using the smart city, that particular example. So Marie gave an excellent broad introduction to what blockchain can be used for smart cities. I'm taking talking about similar things, but in a different angle. Looking at a specific way how we adapt our marketplace. So just a bit about myself. Cross-functional multidisciplinary professional working as a ecosystem design, an advisor, healthcare, innovation specialist, and advisory to blockchain, advisory to a global project in the energy business, and geo sector and charity sectors. So currently I'm developing this architecture adoption called WAP, window viability. So for sustainable growth of marketplaces can be enabled by blockchain AI marketplace platforms. So WAP is the end there is the blockchain. It's actually how we use this solution architecture for every part of our marketplace design, because we're moving from a machine view of the world to this adaptive view. We need to look at contracts or start from our market ecosystem design through our adaptive financing, adaptive contracts. They need to get right first, then to a business process, then to our technology and architecture, then to the blockchain. So I'm starting from say the whole end-to-end A to Z of an architecture adoption. So the WAP is based on a principle of physics, which is in order for any network to be stable, it's intermingled by between that spider and the starfish. It's diversity and efficiency, and it's roughly 60-40 and collaboration competition. And there's a particular physics study that's proven this. And when you're basically become too brittle, and when your system becomes too diversified, it becomes too stagnated. And every network needs to operate in this window of viability, and it's in context of that environment. So it's according to the adoption in the environment. But this what was based on basically the physics of entropy, right? So I don't to bore you with physics, but since then the Big Bang of the world is also not only is it building up, but it's also breaking down at the same time, which is the second law of thermodynamics. It's the mass heat dissipation. At the same time, we have islands of order, which is essentially as we're building up emergence, and we're a whirlpool of order in disorder. As we go from galaxies, the stars, the solar systems, planets, the geological systems, elements, the ecologies, culture, the entropy flow rate. So as mass depth universally falls to mass creation, which is emergence, advanced complexity. So in this basically in physics, we go through stable periods with 60-40, and then we go through either phase evolution happens, jumps, where at 80% we go need a collaboration or we get collapse. We're in a particular phase of transition in the planet where we have to actually move to 80% collaboration, move out of competition to achieve that window. We could achieve collapse. The Earth has gone through 5 major collapses already, but every system does that. It actually goes through either that what's called a phase shift transition in physics. And so the biggest jumps in evolution is collaboration. So the example is the human body, and not is competition. We're walking, talking ecology of subsystems, 100 trillion sentient beings, tissues, organs, DNA systems, etc. But essentially, they're all structures that are operating together in create this mass synthesis, and that's So even your gut is actually made up of 90% of you is not you. It's actually formed of bacteria and protozoa and viruses, but it's all in the overall hierarchy. Now, the window of viability in the human body, everything for you to stay together, it's not static, it's always actually moving. So imagine you're running along and then you're going out for a jog and two dogs chase you. Well, your body, that your heart rate has to speed up, your blood pressure has to speed up, the amount that goes to your blood that goes to your digestive system and your digestive tract has to slow down. But that has to operate in the window of viability. If it goes too far above that window of viability, actually could cause you to die. So your whole system has to operate at window of viability subsystems in respect of the overall system of you. And your system of you is moving through the environment, so it's changing and adapting to the environment as you respond. So our marketplaces we have to consider our marketplaces and include the smart system in the exact same way. That each subsystem needs to be in balance to the systems that it's in, the hierarchy. Not we think of everything in machine in silos. In fact, it has to respond to this. And it's like moving through time. A city is changing through time that you are running. It also needs to adapt to the environment because the environment is changing. And then at a certain point in time, we have the spaceship transition, which is 80% city or to 20% competition. So currently at the moment, all our market systems are very much based on the written system, industrial, where things are centralized, even our social media platforms, while being highly collaborative, the flow of entropy is very central units, and that leads to brittleness in physics. This is actually evident every time the systems collapse when they're too centralized. The same thing in matchmakers. We might have one taxi with Uber, one basically a whole booking engine or Airbnb. While it's hugely profitable, it's not sustainable for a particular long term for particular individuals or corporations. Open source and open collaboration, while they may be highly diversified, they're stagnated. The entropy is too low. So blockchain could also end up being too inefficient because it becomes too diversified. So what we have to do is this centralization and education that our data is created. So we have to consider as well that now everything's interconnected. Our planet is actually a connected ecosystem as a whole. So what happens when we get cancer in our body? Entropy is focused inwards, and that's they've shown me that cancer system inside of itself, it sends out its own scouts, its own immune system. We are actually creating these systems that we're inputting entropy back on ourselves. We have to think of everything as a collective whole. Otherwise, we could end. We see that with the environmental, geological, and ecological, and financial systems. It's very brittle. So the wall looks at everything from the market system design right down to the blockchain, and we need to look at window viability, spiral, and dynamic evolutionary way. So one particular use case then I looked at called an OpenCSR, which is again an open framework that I'm looking forward to we say to be used, is basically using blockchain to create distributed ownership of consent data and identity data to the individuals that actually need to own it in this balance between centralization and distribution. So it's more as so again, it's OpenCSR is an idea of open consent secure registry of registered data and consent. And I don't spend too long on it. But current consent systems are in your basically data is held in thousands of systems. What should be using the blockchain is your data, you control that data, one basically source through it. But it's a distributed that is not centralized, but you control it, right? And that means that you can actually have a view of everything. Also, we need to show you the right way of that data and proper reporting tools that your data is being used. So there's also people talk about who is the actor. When people think the citizen, it's actually in the supply chain. There's different players. There's the payer. There's the provider. There's the service user and service regulator. So I'll give an example from say the health system, right? You know, like I work in a health system in Ireland. This is indicative of any health system. So for example, the health provision industry The service payer in this case, payer says 20 billion a year to deliver health services in the country. 20,000 agencies, which would be either GPs, consultants, allied health professionals, and all the supporting agencies, deliver those health. So the service users, which is about 25% of the population, comes through it, and the health system. And then service regulators are like the GDPR agencies, the health regulatory agencies, etc. Each one of them need to hold registration consent rate. But like health and all other systems, the top, as an example, the top 5% takes 60-70% of the cost. We don't want to look at basically how to use system thinking to manage our cities, manage our services better, because it's total where this is balanced efficiency and urgency. So if we start with the public data, like registry data, which we got all the providers, 10,000 providers, instead of having, for example, in Ireland and the UK, we have 4,000 databases, but each of the 4,000 instead of registry, public data, which is GPs, consultants, etc. Where we want set of registries that the payer says, okay, you register once in blockchain, and that basically then 4,000 database have those supply data. What can it have? Things like where the service is, what group is provided, what opening hours, what's the cost, etc. That becomes the supply. Then what we do is we move to what I call the same service requests. Normally, right across the world, we do requests, and that's we go through a lot of big private sector and foundations, and then we look at the universal power. But there's no efficiency in that. It's hugely inefficient. So we have our supply, which is our registry of our providers. Then we look for a service request. That we make a service offering, because we could see the service type come through, and the top 5% will be allocated more evenly and scheduled as well. And then we then do a service offering. And only at that point does the service user register their consent and that they want to receive that data. And that means that the demand resource utilization will be done at the registry level very, very easily. What could this be used for? It could be used for everything from refugee management, delivery, vaccinations, education services, border control, smart grid management, smart city management, etc. So so OpenCSR in this perspective, you can use blockchain, but essentially what we foundation, the idea would be that this would be something that could be used by it's an open foundation. Nobody owns your data. It's owned by a consensus mechanism. It's almost like a constitution, global constitution. It's agreed by the community, and the rules of smart grids. And we can tokenize that adoption by the agencies that use this may get the service cheaper, get it delivered, and so that's how we can tokenize this with the blockchain. So essentially, I will skip that bit. What CSR is involved, it's balancing that, it's in the window of viability between balancing efficiency and diversity, centralization, collaboration in the right smart thinking. So that's my presentation. I hope it was.
Well, fortunately, then we've left plenty of time for questions. So with that, that helps to sort of frame the discussion we can move on into now. I'm sure that many of you, came, sort of what the subject matter was about, but I want to turn it over to you guys now, and allow you to ask questions, or use this time to even ask questions that you may have brought in the room from outside. Maybe show of hands. Does anyone have questions yet? Here, let me bring you over a microphone here, quick, because I've got. Let's grab this one. Just double check that my colleagues. Can you guys hear us? Yeah. Awesome. So you maybe give us your name and
Sure.
who you're
Hey,
with.
hey, this is a question for Michael. This is Erin Haley from Homeland Security. So this OpenCSR model, how mature is it? And I just did a quick Google thing online. Can you send some pointers?
And this is a model that I haven't released to the public yet. And I want it as I want it as an open intelligence. We think both. I haven't released it yet. This is the first actually time I've ever presented it. So it's not out there yet.
Yeah, it's pretty fresh. I mean, Michael and I have been working on. Michael's got a set of 30 or so different white papers that all revolve around. And this open CSR is one example of the different use cases that those papers fall into. And it's an idea, although we're seeing vendors out there that are doing distributed decentralized identity systems today. So it's different in that respect, but the way that it's tokenized, sort of the business model underneath it is, I think, unique compared to some others.
So it would be really helpful, I mean, at some point, maybe you can document, that in your model versus what exists right now. So, and I know there's things like, vendor, is it VRM, vendor relation management and things. So I'd be curious to know, I'm a stickler for, hey, let's not reinvent the wheel. A lot of people are going off, spinning off duplicates of what already exists. So love to know how your model compares to what exists right now and how it may be better than that. And then also, what your plans for sort of transitioning it or gathering, in terms of, this is another thing, right? Adoption is another thing where, network effects are going to be huge. So what's your game plan in terms of building that?
We see existing models. A lot of the models at the moment are based, I think, primarily around technology, where I'm trying to, with OpenCSR, for example, the technology agnostic, that is based more a rules-based consensus. Well, the blockchain is kind of an abstraction from the identity consensus. Because, for example, you could have credentialing in the Internet of Things. You saw in the UK, there was tens of thousands of and we didn't have a credentialing system. So we could actually use OpenCSR to bring all the internet companies who are credentialing, say, patch updates we'll say for machines, like getting the latest, that you have the latest Microsoft patch, whatever, and you could feed into a superhighway, which is this open source network. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the one blockchain, as long as we have the rule mechanisms on this. So I don't. It's a protocol that is of any particular technology framework, etc.
Yeah, and we can take that offline afterwards too. I've been was meaning to you anyway. So I mean, I have to imagine that some of you have ideas for blockchain or distributed ledger capabilities, either in your products or in your cities or in your jurisdictions. Does anyone have a particular question they have about the information or about blockchain or distributed ledgers or how it's applied? Let me bring the microphone back over this way.
Hi, I'm Nawais English, so I'm going to ask very basic questions.
Sure.
Are there any cities that are actually currently using any blockchain technology in their administration or any part of their day-to-day workings?
For you, Marie, are there examples of any cities out there today? I mean, I think you showed a couple things, but you have certainly got your finger on the pulse of that a little bit more closely. Examples of cities that are deploying using blockchains.
So, in terms of cities, and I'm sorry, I don't have it on me right now, but the whole thing started with this Japanese city who on putting the grid on blockchain. However, there are also cities, and again, I'm really sorry, I don't know the names here, but they're actually starting to put their cities on ICOs, initial point offerings. So it is a relatively and actually find out about use cases and actual proof of concepts that are taking place. And then, of course, living in Vancouver, we had the actual registry. I think what I haven't seen cities go all in and decentralize everything, but I do think globally, I'm just thinking of other cities. Like there's also some little projects happening within them, and sometimes in a more informal basis. Vancouver City, for example, started using it to look at how they're going to deal with homeless. To get, for example, the funding to them in a way that is better, because they often lose their money and so on. So I'm sorry I couldn't give you a specific example of a large scale initiative, but you know, you'll be able to find out about it.
That's one of the things that we discovered in putting this together. You know, I was Skip reached out to me last Friday because they wanted, you know, something blockchain related in the program because it makes a lot of sense, and we didn't have any. So as I started going on doing research, because I'm more of a blockchain crypto kind of the world. I mean, I certainly have an interest in smart cities, a lot of depth in healthcare, so I know about, you know, cities and civic from that perspective. But we couldn't find a lot of examples because examples out there yet. I mean, in the, I'll say 4 or 5 years where there's been a lot more traction in that crypto industry, most of it's been focused on banking and finance and value exchange. Bitcoin was the experiment that got out of the lab, and it's the thing that got everyone's attention. So it was that use case of blockchain that really got the most attention. And that's, again, why I started out with, or named the session Distributed Ledgers. Shake off that blockchain tag, right, that draws everyone in. But that gets used in the news a lot, that gets used in reporting a lot as the example of this is the technology and it's going to sink the planet in terms of energy, but they're not looking at all of the other things. I mean, the cryptocurrency use case is just a very, while it's important and it's very visible, it's not the important development. It's the other stuff that we're to do, these smart contracts, right? And most people think about smart contracts and they can conflate the term contract with it being a legal contract. So smart contracts are actually cryptographic contracts. So they're more like trust between two parties that have a jurisdiction that's digital, right? So I can do a smart contract using a system like Ethereum. So hands, how many's heard of Ethereum? Right? How many heard Bitcoin? Almost everyone, probably, right? Close. So Bitcoin, or rather Ethereum, is the next generation of cryptocurrency, really, right? And what Bitcoin has is the ability to provably store a record of trust or an event that happens between two parties. And in the cryptocurrency case, it's exchange of value, exchange of some value. You have a wallet, I have a wallet. Blockchain itself, this public ledger for Bitcoin, stores the fact that we've traded this much, right? And it's anonymous, and we know all these details. But Ethereum takes that same thing and adds a layer of programmability onto it. So it works, and the trust mechanism works because there's this thing underneath it called proof of work algorithm that's running all the time, that's just doing a mathematical computation, and all the other participants, all the miners, are all doing that same thing. And that's how they reach consensus. And when one person claims a block, which means that in this chain of blocks, they claim to have won a block in this mining competition. And that block contains the validated transactions of all the transactions of you and I. So they then get paid a sum of Bitcoin for being awarded that block. But the Ethereum system works very differently. A lot of similar mechanisms, but its model for maintaining trust is based on something called. What they do is they take the cryptocurrency and, like I was saying before, there's value in that cryptocurrency that's essentially tokenized money. Although in a smart contract, you can tokenize other things, like it could be a car, it could be a boat, service, whatever it is. But when you combine that tokenized asset along with the programming language, now in your programming language, you can define what the agreement is between parties. That's why it's called a contract, right? But that contract environment, in a public environment or semi-public environment, with all of those players who are a party to the system, a party to the contract. So everyone knows and trusts the environment. So then they trust the outcome, right? And in Bitcoin, we step. In Ethereum, we have a little bit of the Ethereum cryptocurrency, which is called gas. And that cryptocurrency is the incentive for the network. Just like in Bitcoin, the incentive for the network is to mine and win coins, right? In Ethereum, the reason why people are participating in this consensus model is because they have a chance to get some of that gas for processing the transactions. So Bitcoin is a voting popularity contest. Ethereum for paying for its trust and consensus through some money that's attached, right? And if I on the Ethereum side try to inject a fake transaction in, well, everyone else sees that, right? And they say, no, that's, they don't allow it in. Just like in Bitcoin, I could try and forge a transaction, right? And give myself $1 million worth of Bitcoin, but all those other voters and miners, because it's a public ledger and it's everyone can see and mathematically prove, they can't inject that bad transaction in there. So what that ultimately means, though, is that those types of operations, those validation and consensus operations that used to happen at some sort of managerial level, like we would create a consortium, director, and it would have rules and bylaws, and it'd be like another company that's running this operation, but it's still run by people, and it's still subject to the incentives that can change the organization's behavior. Let's say there are actions between organizations, right? There might be a way to corrupt it and make your transactions go faster than someone else's. So these are the kind of fundamental problems that this technology is able to sort of deal with. Again, backing into the subject matter that we're talking about, knowing this, right? Well, how do we start to think about decentralizing our organizations and squeezing the value? One of the examples that Michael had used was around the healthcare use case, where we have a number of consortium participants who are doing something common, doing something similar, and instead of being duplicative in their efforts, they could collaborate. And I think that's going to the point of what he's talking about. And there are some working examples in the world. There's a pilot being done by Optum right now. Optum is an insurance company. They've gone out and formed a consortium of other participants in this network. And what they're doing is a blockchain for provider, like healthcare provider demographic information, right? And every single insurance company calls every single doctor in their network, 12 to 20 or something like that, because they have to get that information and make sure it's up to date and accurate in doctors' offices. But now if you're accepting insurance from 15 companies, you as the doctor are now getting 25 calls a month for the same 25 different entities. So what they're doing is they're now getting together and looking at, well, how do we create a public database of this very basic information that we all need that shows up in your billing, allows the insurance company allows them to have an address for a provider in the list that the insurance company publishes of providers who accept their insurance. So you have all these moving parts. But now, applying that in the city, there's a number of use technology like this. So, yes, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, just because I know we only have a few minutes left.
Yeah, we're pretty close to the end.
Yeah, I think it's that when I talk about the inefficiencies in say how they duplicate basically registries, but what you need to, that's why I went with this idea of thinking it from the top down. Our biggest problem is not even tokenized flow capital. It's actually the flow capital itself. So as an advisor in government across the world, what happens in say public entities, large organizations, the way the contracts work is that if I basically show efficiency, if a particular entity shows efficiency, they lose the capital, not the other year. So what you have is our models of flow capital forces competition, and the incentivization for collaboration is not there. So if we want to shift and change our city, we have to start from the top down. And in fact, it's the banks and the problems, cryptocurrency the answer. No, it's not. If we still don't change the flow of capital, change the contracts, that is adapting and learning to what needs to be done, we're not going to get the efficiencies. 80% of all projects are failing. 80% of all IT projects over 10 million are failing. 87% of people by a Global Gallagher survey are not satisfied with organizations. 80% of our healthcare costs are chronic diseases. yet it's been shown that 80% by lifetime changes. So our model in incentivizing, it's not just cryptocurrency, it's if we can use smart contracts, if we can use a change in how we do and change the flow of capital, we change everything. So it's that broader thinking we need to come in this into our market ecosystem design.
So Marie, any last words?
Yes, so a really good example just around cities is to look at the city of Zug and their voting that they are citizens. Zug, Switzerland, yeah, they're a really good example that you can look at. Yes, I just want to say, you know, it's from my experience in the space at the moment, to expect cities and city councils to sort of really, you know, create committees to implement these or look at these technologies, I think is going to be challenging. You know, there's so much that they have to deal with, and what we're finding is that in the blockchain community itself, there is this natural way of self-organizing that, and you know, and so it's going to be in industry insights cities, you know, starting to work together. The folks who are working with, you know, power systems, you know, grids and so on, or people who are actually, you know, looking at new forms of wealth, you know, the merchant and industry. That's where it's going to happen, and then I think, you know, the cities will probably follow through. And those projects, a lot of folks are working on, and it all just depends on the regulatory certainty in an environment, talent that they've got available, and we've identified 12 criteria for you to know if there's a healthy ecosystem. So organizations don't need to wait for a city itself to start looking at these solutions, to look at your own industry and seeing how you can create new value and the new and obviously make yourself sustainable in the future.
Thank you very much. And with that, we're about a minute or two over our time. I think we get till 2:30, but I thank everyone, and thank you, Michael and Marie, very much for joining us. And follow up with anyone, grab me out in the hall, or I'll find you. And thank you again. All right, guys, thank you. I will, I guess, drop you off here, and I'll be in touch. Thanks again.